Hey, Kevin here with Horology Project, where I talk about my journey with watches. Thanks for watching this video. We're going to be talking about the Seiko Mini Turtle. But before I jump into this in-depth review, go ahead and hit that like button and consider subscribing. That really helps me out, and hopefully we can continue to grow this channel so that I can get more watches in my possession. All right, so as I said, we are talking about the Seiko Mini Turtle. That's reference number SRPC35. So this watch is the successor to the classic, famous SKX. Is this a better watch? Let's talk about that. So in order to jump in, let's go ahead and just mention what the dimensions are. This watch is 42.3 millimeters in diameter. It has a case thickness of 13 millimeters. The lug to lug, I believe it is 45 millimeters, but I'm going to need to double check that. It might be 44. And the lug to lug width is 20 millimeters. So this watch is very much in proportion to what Seiko's in the SKX line has brought out before. It's kind of in the middle though, kind of in the middle between the 013 and the 007 in size. Now, interesting thing, as I had mentioned, this is a 42.3 millimeter watch. But one thing that's really cool about that is this watch wears incredibly well on the wrist. Specifically, it wears smaller on the wrist than its dimensions would suggest. I have a smaller wrist. I'm at 6.5 inches in diameter, which is a little bit below average. So I typically do not look at watches that are above 40 or 41 millimeters because I just end up feeling like the watch is wearing me instead of me wearing the watch. However, when I put this watch on, let me go ahead and take the time to show you guys that. I think this watch wears really, really well on the wrist. A large portion of that comes down to two different factors. One of them being the lug to lug. So because this has a pretty short lug to lug, especially for a 42 millimeter plus watch, this watch looks much smaller than what it is. And let me say that the camera typically makes a watch look even bigger on the wrist. So even with this camera zoomed in at my wrist, it still looks proportionate. It doesn't look off at all. In my opinion, it doesn't look out of place. It looks like it's sized a-okay. Another reason why this watch looks proportionate to the wears a little bit smaller and looks good even on smaller wrists is because the bezel and the dial are smaller than the case size would suggest. So because it's 42 millimeters, you would think that it would be bigger, but it's not, because the bezel actually comes in a couple of millimeters on each side or so, since you can see this turtle shape actually comes out, but the bezel is still inside, and so is the dial. So these two things are smaller than a typical 42 millimeter watch, thus making it appear as if it is smaller as well. Another great thing too is that it has a 20 millimeter lug width, which again helps it stay within those classic proportions. I love 20 millimeter lug watches mainly because I have so many of them, and it allows for me to switch out straps and share straps with each watch. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the features of the watch and maybe some noticeable differences. I'm not trying to make this too heavy of a comparison between the SKX and this, but there are going to be some things that are worth mentioning. So let's just go ahead and talk about the design. This is a turtle design, meaning that the shape of the watch looks a little bit like a turtle shell. Some people love that, some people hate that. You know, I think in a world where a lot of dive watches look like iterations of a Submariner, I think that it's nice to not have a watch look like another Submariner. It's a unique design, and it's unique to Seiko, and I think that for that reason alone, it's kind of worth checking out, especially if you enjoy having a different style. Um, because it is a turtle shape, I do think that at times, even though I like this lug width, it can look a little strange on wrist, specifically with the steel bracelet. Um, but I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So other features with the watch, it is a divers certified watch for 200 meters. So you can have fun getting this wet, jumping in the pool and and going for those dives if you're interested without having to worry. The crown placement is at a classic 3 o'clock position, but that is not classic to Seiko. Typically, Seiko's dive watches have the crown at the 4 o'clock position. Now, I don't mind the crown at the 3 o'clock position. It's a very traditional position. The only thing I will say about this one, though, is I kind of wish that, like Seiko's other watches, they allowed the crown to be put into the watch instead of having it sit on the outside of the watch. So because it doesn't have any crown guards and the crown is substantial in size, it sits a little proud on the watch. And I think that is going to be a little bit more divisive for people. And I personally think that it would look better aesthetically if this went into the watch in the same way it goes into the watch for Seiko's other divers out there. So I'll give it a little bit of a knock for that. As far as other features that this watch has, it has a date complication, which that's a welcome change from the day date complication. I typically don't like day dates because it can just be a headache to get them working right if you're not daily wearing it. Um, and then as far as the dial is concerned, the dial is absolutely beautiful. It's a nice matte black kind of finish with painted on indices. I believe they're painted indices with borders around it, and it gives it a little bit more of a classy look with those metallic borders around the indices. And I really want to praise Seiko for this unique indice application because they're very different in shape, but it works. It's not those typical round markers that we see in a lot of watches, and I think it looks really unique, and I'm digging it. I really like it. This watch is a dive watch, so it has a rotating bezel. The rotating bezel feels very in line with Seiko's other rotating bezels out there. It is a little stiff. It feels a little mushy, feels a little tinny as well, but it works well, and you can try it, wear it with confidence and knowing that it's not going to knock around, and it rotates really well with almost no play at all. I really don't get any play. On every now and then on a little turn I get a play, but for the most part this bezel has no play. And if you haven't seen some of my other videos, the way that it works is you line up this marker with your minute hand, and as the minute hand goes around the watch, you read wherever the minute hand is on the bezel of the watch. So once the minute hand is here, 5 minutes has gone by, 10, 15, 20, so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and jump in a little bit to the movement. The movement on this watch is a caliber 4R35. It's an automatic 24 jewel movement. This watch does feature hand winding, which is an upgrade from the SKX. The SKX did not have hand winding, and this watch also has another feature. Let's pull out that crown so I can show you it. Hacking seconds. That means that when you pull out the crown, that the seconds stop. And this works really, really well, so it allows you to keep the most accurate time as possible. The accuracy for this watch has been rated at plus 45 to minus 35 a day. And, Seiko watches will probably run within that range, but they can be kind of worked on to have a better range. One thing that I do want to knock though about this hand winding hacking movement is the the hacking. Though it works perfectly fine, as you'll notice, if I apply a little bit of back pressure, that is, the second hand will kind of jostle itself a little bit. So I don't know if you're noticing as I'm applying the back pressure to the watch and moving the second hands in reverse, or the minute hands in reverse, you'll notice that the second hand jostles a little. I don't think that's gonna create any performance issues or anything like that, or anything to be worried about with the watch, but it is something worth mentioning, and it never inspires too much confidence when I see that happening. But I don't think that it's anything that anyone should be worried about. The winding on it is incredibly smooth. I mean, it's phenomenal. I'm going to try to bring it to the mic now, so I'm going to take this watch off camera and see if you can hear it. It's so quiet that I'm a little doubtful, but let's see. It's buttery smooth. It really is nice. As far as winding in the crown, it screws in really easily. There is a sense of grittiness to it as you screw out the crown or screw in the crown. So I'm guessing that the finishing on those threads could be a little bit better. It could just be this example, but I'm not sure. I can't speak to that. This watch does feature Seiko's famous Lumibrite, which let's go ahead and show you how that lume looks. I have not charged this watch at all, and as you can see, the lume is phenomenal. Let's give you a closer look of that. It just works so great. It's so easy to read, not too bright, but bright enough. I haven't charged this watch. It's only just been under my lamp here, so I haven't even fully charged it, and it's working great. You got to give Seiko a hand for having phenomenal lume. The only thing that I don't understand, and I was hoping they would get rid of this with this watch, but they put the lume on the second hand on the opposite end, and that just drives me nuts. I don't know why they do that. It makes no sense to me. Lume should be on the other side of the hand, in my opinion, because as you're reading the watch at night, you think the second hand is over here, but in fact, it's opposite of it. So it's silly to me. I don't get it. Maybe someone out there has a good explanation. So if you know why Seiko does that, let me know, because that's always kind of puzzled me. So as far as the other details about this watch, I think it's a great watch. I'll talk about the bracelet for a second. I do have the bracelet over here, so just kind of put the watch here for a second. It comes with a steel oyster style bracelet. This is a solid bracelet and definitely an upgrade from the SKX. I still have it in its wrappings. And the reason why is because this doesn't have screwed in pins, which at this point in life I've gotten kind of spoiled, as more watches in the affordable price range have had the screw-in pins. This does have the push-in pins, and I don't have the tools or the skills to adjust it myself. So that means I'm going to have to go to a jeweler or my watchsmith to take care of that. But as far as the how solid this feels, it feels really, really solid. It is a kind of a reverse style oyster, meaning that typically the direction of an oyster bracelet is in this direction if this were the watch and going down to the clasp, but it is in a reverse direction with brushed finished and slightly polished edges on the middle of the links, and it looks great. The clasp does wear a little big, since it has a diver's extension unit at the end that kind of curves and continues the sizing of the clasp, but it does have a folding keeper and two push buttons here, so this clasp is not going to open on you at all. So I like it. I like the bracelet. And another positive about the bracelet is it does come with solid end links, so that's really good, and it looks good when it was on the watch. But I had put it on a NATO, as I haven't been to my watchsmith yet. All in all, I think that this is a good watch, worth having. The question is it better to buy this watch or to go with the classic SKX? I think that's a hard question to answer. On the one hand, this watch on a tech spec perspective is better than the SKX. I feel like the bezel is slightly better. I think the dial is definitely better. It's nicer with the metallic pieces on it, and I like the uniqueness of the shape and the date complication. And I personally like the Cyclops. Some people probably won't. And then it has a better movement in it. It's hand winding. It's hacking. So tech specs, it's a better watch. But this watch has been trading at a higher price tag. I think most of the times it can be had for around a 350 price range, but it seems like the range right now is somewhere around 3 to 400. I think if you're getting this watch at $350, it's money well spent in the watch world. I definitely think it's worth that value. I think the only thing that's kind of causing this watch to maybe not sell as well is the fact that most people are comfortable with what Seiko has to offer with the SKX at the $200 price range, because it's really easy to get an SKX around 200 to 250. If these watches were priced the same, I think the only thing that you would really need to ask yourself outside of the tech spec question is if you like the design of the watch. As I mentioned, it has a Cyclops. Some people don't like Cyclopses. And it has a turtle design, which again is very different. I think personally my preference is for that oyster shape, but I like the uniqueness of this design. I like that it's not like a typical oyster style watch, but that it's very different in its appearance. So I definitely think that it's unique in that way. So I think you just need to ask yourself: are you willing to pay $100 more if you like all the features and if the designs are the same for you? If you like the design of the SKX, then just stick with the SKX. I'm not sure if the hand winding is and the hacking is enough to really cause you to spend $100 more. They're going to be so similar in timekeeping and in all the other performance factors like water resistance. But all in all, it's a great watch. I definitely recommend it. And you may want to check out the different colors that it comes in. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think? SKX or Mini Turtle? Which one do you enjoy more? Do you think that this watch wears well on the wrist? I think it does. I think it's a good happy medium between the SKX013 and the SKX007. Will this watch end up discontinuing the SKX line? I'd love to hear your thoughts on whether you think that's going to happen or not. So please leave your comments below. I'd love to just kind of hear your feedback on that. And just another reminder to like and subscribe. I'm really trying to build this channel up, and your liking and subscribing helps me to do that. Until the next one.